When Robert Downey Jr.'s car breaks down outside a small, forgotten auto shop, he expects nothing more than a quick repair, but inside, working alone under dim fluorescent lights, is an aging mechanic. Hands weathered, movements precise, and a silence that speaks louder than words. Something about the man, his focus, his solitude, lingers with Robert long after he drives away. A week later, Robert returns, hoping just to say thank you. But when he arrives, the shop is dark, the doors are locked, and what he learns next leaves him standing in the street, speechless. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, hit that subscribe button. We've got another special one coming tomorrow. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting a golden hue across the cracked sidewalks and faded signs. On the outskirts of town, inside a humble old-school auto repair shop, Henry Carter wiped grease off his calloused hands. At 72, Henry had been fixing cars longer than most people had been alive. His one-man shop had outlasted big dealerships and fancy service centers, not because it was cutting edge, but because people trusted Henry. But trust didn't cover medical bills. He pressed a hand to his chest as that familiar tightness crept in. Probably just fatigue, he told himself. No time to be sick, not with work to do. Just as Henry was reaching to close up, he heard it, the uneven sputter of an engine gasping for life. He turned, squinting toward the sound. Rolling to a stop outside the shop was a deep red Ferrari, vintage, sleek, and far too expensive for a place like this. The engine coughed one last time before dying completely. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man in a black leather jacket and dark jeans. Sunglasses came off. His presence? Effortlessly cool. He looked like he belonged on a movie set, not in a dusty garage. "Evening," he said with a nod. "Think you could take a look?" Henry eyed the car, then the man. Something about his face tickled the edges of memory, but he didn't place it. Probably just another rich guy with a fancy toy, he thought. "Humph," Henry grunted. "Too much luxury for my taste." The man chuckled. "Yeah, but under the hood it's still a car, right?" Henry gave a dry smirk. "A motor's a motor." Without another word, he grabbed his toolbox and popped the hood, never realizing he was speaking to Robert Downey Jr. "I like people who do things the right way," Robert said casually. Henry snorted. "Yeah? Then you're in the wrong city, kid." Robert chuckled but didn't argue. He watched quietly as Henry twisted a wrench and adjusted a belt with practiced ease. Thousands of cars had passed through Henry's hands over the decades, and this one was no different. But today, something was off. His breath felt heavier, a dull pressure pressed into his chest. He ignored it. He always did. There was still work to finish. "You've been doing this a long time?" Robert asked, eyes on the man, not just the machine. 50 years. Henry grumbled. "Opened this shop in 74. Never closed since." Robert nodded, clearly impressed. "That's rare these days." Henry wiped the grease from his hands, eyeing the stranger. "Yeah? What do you do?" Robert smiled. "I work in entertainment." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Music? Movies?" Robert hesitated just a moment. "Movies," Henry grunted. "Figures, always a Hollywood guy behind the wheel of a Ferrari." Robert laughed, not offended, just amused. "Not mine. Borrowed it from a friend. But I do like cars." Henry nodded in approval. "At least you respect them. Most people with money treat them like trophies." Robert's smile faltered just a little, his gaze turning thoughtful. "Yeah, I've never cared much for trophies." Henry turned back to the engine, gripping his wrench, then froze. A sharp, burning pain flared through his chest, spreading beneath his ribs. His vision blurred for a second. Then, as quickly as it came, it eased. He forced himself to keep moving. Just another episode. He'd had a few lately. No time to worry now. He tightened the final bolt and stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "All right," he said, voice firm. "Try it now." Robert slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared back to life. Smooth, clean, perfect. Henry crossed his arms and nodded, satisfied. "There she is." Robert smiled, running a hand over the steering wheel. "Beautiful." He stepped out and reached for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Henry shook his head. "Nothing. Seeing a car run right, and that's enough for me." Robert paused, clearly surprised. "Are you sure?" "I don't charge for easy jobs," Henry said, waving him off. "Just come back if she gives you trouble again." Robert looked at him for a long second, then smiled. "I will, and I'll bring you a coffee next time." Henry chuckled. "Just don't bring that fancy Starbucks crap." They both laughed. Robert climbed back into the Ferrari, rolled down the window, and gave a respectful nod. nod. "See you soon, Mr. Carter." Henry only grunted, watching as the Ferrari disappeared into the street. He had no idea who he had just helped, and no idea how much that man would change his life. As Henry locked up the shop for the night, the pressure in his chest returned, sharper now. He gripped the doorframe, breathing slow, waiting for it to pass. It did, like always. Shaking it off, he flicked off the lights. Another day, another car, but tomorrow would be different, because the man he had just helped was already making plans. And next time, he wouldn't come empty-handed. The hum of the Ferrari's engine echoed beneath Robert Downey Jr. as he drove through the quiet LA streets. The wind was cool, the city glowing in neon and shadows. But Robert wasn't thinking about the car. He was thinking about Henry Carter. Gruff, honest, the kind of man you don't meet often anymore. Robert had worked with countless people, actors, producers, tech moguls, but something about Henry stuck, something real. He poured himself a glass of water when he got home, sat down at his laptop and typed, "Henry Carter Auto Repair, Los Angeles." The first result was a bare-bones website. No branding, no offers, no corporate polish. Just a title, Carter's Auto Repair. Honest work, honest hands. Robert Downey Jr. clicked through the old website. Grainy photos showed a younger Henry Carter, proud, grease-streaked, holding a wrench in front of the same shop. The sign barely changed in 5 decades. He scrolled down. Then something caught his eye. Forum posts. Dozens of them. Raw, unfiltered stories from locals who had known Henry not as a mechanic, but as the guy you could count on. "I was broke and my car died on the freeway. Henry fixed it for free, told me to pay when I could. I never forgot that. He once stayed after hours to fix my truck so I could make it to my night shift. Wouldn't take a dime extra. My dad brought his Chevy here for 30 years. After he passed, Henry fixed it up so we could drive it to the funeral." Robert leaned closer, his jaw tight. This wasn't just a man with a wrench. Henry was a quiet legend. The kind of person Hollywood never noticed, but they should have. He sat back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen. Henry Carter wasn't just another mechanic in East LA. He was one of the good ones, and good people like him. They deserved more than to fade into forgotten pavement cracks. His mind raced. He couldn't just hand Henry a check. The guy would probably throw it back at him. Money wasn't the point. Legacy was. Robert thought back to their brief conversation about doing things the right way, about how most mechanics just swapped parts instead of really knowing machines. Then it clicked. This wasn't about charity. It was about building something that could last, just like Henry had done, every day since 1974. Robert smiled. He knew what to do. He closed his laptop and grabbed his phone, ready to make a call to someone who owed him a favor. But before he could dial, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A voice on the other end, quiet. Is this Robert Downey Jr.? He sat up, alert. "Who's asking? My name's Bill. I run the laundromat across the street from Carter's Auto. I saw you at the shop yesterday. Figured, if anyone could help, maybe it's you." Robert's pulse spiked. "Help with what?" Bill's voice wavered. "Henry's in the hospital." Silence. The words hit Robert like a gut punch. He had planned to go back tomorrow. Now! Tomorrow might be too late. He grabbed his keys. No hesitation, some debts couldn't wait. And Henry Carter didn't deserve to be just another forgotten name scrawled on a clipboard in a hospital ward. The streets of East LA were quieter than usual as Robert pulled up to Carter's Auto Repair. Dark, empty, the kind of silence that carries weight. He stepped out of the car, gravel crunching under his boots, and walked to the door. A sheet of paper was taped to the glass, uneven, weather wrinkled. Closed indefinitely. His jaw clenched. It was real. And judging by the dust layering the windows, Henry hadn't been here for days. Robert stood there in the stillness, absorbing the moment, when the sound of footsteps turned him around. A man in his 60s, flannel shirt faded from time, crossed the street from the laundromat. He looked like someone who had known hard work and longer days. "You're the guy from last night, right?" he said. Robert nodded. "You, Bill?" The man gave a tired smile. "Yeah. Sorry to call you out of the blue, but I figured you'd want to know. What happened?" Bill rubbed a hand over his beard, eyes somber. "Henry had a spell a couple days ago. Chest pain. Real bad. Customer found him hunched over near the lift, trying to work through it." Robert swallowed hard. "Got him to the ER just in time. They say it was a mild heart attack. But with someone Henry's age, that's not small." Silence hung between them. Then Bill added, "He's stable now, but they're keeping him for observation. Told him he needs to slow down." Robert let out a breath, nodding. "Slow down. Yeah, right. Henry Carter didn't know how to slow down. Robert looked back at the shop. The tools left exactly where they'd been set down. An engine half open under a dusty tarp. The ghosts of work unfinished. No, this place didn't need to be boarded up. It needed to live on. Henry's legacy deserved better, and Robert was going to make sure it got it. The shop buzzed with the energy of second chances. It had been 3 months since the grand reopening. The Henry Carter Technical Garage wasn't just a repair shop anymore. It was a living legacy, a place where seasoned mechanics worked alongside teens fresh out of high school, where grease-stained hands belonged to both veterans and rookies, and where the sound of an engine turning over was met with quiet pride instead of just a receipt. Henry Carter still showed up 5 days a week, against doctor's orders, of course. He didn't run the garage like he used to. Now he taught, watched, corrected, sometimes barked, mostly guided, and though he'd never admit it aloud, he was learning too, how to slow down, how to share the load, how to let something grow beyond his own hands. One afternoon, Robert Downey Jr. walked in to find Henry leaning against a tool bench, sipping weak coffee and watching a kid install a carburetor with shaky determination. "You're late," Henry muttered, not looking up. Robert raised an eyebrow. "Really? I bring the food and I still get grief," Henry sniffed. "Unless it's chili from Ramirez's down the street, you're still late." Robert grinned and tossed the bag to him. "Too extra spicy." Henry gave a small grunt of approval. Finally, a man of taste. They sat on old crates and ate in silence. Not awkward, just comfortable. A kind of bond had formed between them. A mechanic and a movie star, neither trying to be more than who they were. "You know," Robert said, wiping his hands, "this place, it's something special." Henry didn't respond immediately. He watched the garage hum with life. Teenagers with smudged faces leaned over engines. Retired mechanics gave tips. A couple of neighborhood kids swept the floor, more curious about spark plugs than social media. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, guess it is." Over the months, the garage grew. They started weekend workshops, after-school programs. Quiet scholarships appeared, funded anonymously by Robert, of course. No flashy credits, no press releases. When the media eventually caught wind, headlines ran wild. Iron Man builds real-life garage for underdogs. Robert Downey Jr. reboots. Lives one wrench at a time. Robert declined interviews. "It's not my story, Hunty," he told a reporter once. "It's Henry's." Henry only gave one interview, a crackly local radio spot where he spoke plainly. "I ain't a hero, I just fix things. Turns out that's enough." Years later, after Henry had retired, though he still showed up twice a week to yell at people holding tools wrong, Robert stood beside him at a small ceremony. A new wing of the garage had just been finished, the Founder's Bay. On the wall was a simple plaque, in honor of Henry Carter, mechanic, mentor, legend. Because doing things right never goes out of style. Henry stared at it for a long moment. Then, without looking over, he muttered, "All right, Downey. Maybe this wasn't such a crazy idea." Robert chuckled. "Maybe." Henry gave a rare, tired smile. "Fine. You were right." And so the shop kept running. Engines kept turning. Lessons kept being passed on. Because some places aren't just buildings. They're proof that one honest life, lived right, can ripple through generations. And Henry Carter's story, it never ended. It just got passed down. One wrench, one student, one fixed life at a time.